Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we are filming inside my parents' house with this interesting backdrop. Now that I'm out of quarantine, I can actually go inside places and get around to filming things for you. As I already have mentioned in a post on my channel, I actually filmed this video previously, but the audio quality on it was just like so bad and I couldn't fix it. Today's video is the first in a series that I'm going to be doing and was inspired by the fact that I get quite a few messages from people asking me to tell them the best companies to work for in the UK. And the answer to that is I don't know. The first reason I don't know the answer to this question is because I have not worked for every single archaeological company in the UK, so I can't really give you my personal experience at each and every one of them. And also in addition to that, this is an answer that is going to be different for each individual person. Everyone is at a different stage in their life. They have different things that matter to them, and things that matter to me or that I look for might not necessarily be the same things that appeal to you or are things that you prioritize. So instead of giving you a blanket answer of these are the companies you should work for, similar to my university's videos, this series is going to be about giving you the tools in order to be able to decide for yourself. So the idea is that we are going to look at all these different parameters that you should be able to identify from looking at a job advertisement for a company, and I'm going to point out some stuff that you should be looking for or ways to compare things between companies in order to help you decide whether or not this is a job that you want to put the effort into applying for. Initially, I started writing this as just a single video, but then when I was doing my script, I had so much stuff that I wanted to point out, I actually thought it was better to just separate it into smaller, more digestible chunks. I know I already tend to have quite long videos on my channel, but I really didn't want to go past like the 50-minute mark. So I've divided it into 3 separate videos. Today's video and the first one is going to be talking about just a general background of companies and just researching the place that you are potentially going to be applying to work at. The second video is going to cover salaries and everything to do with money and remuneration. And then the third video is going to cover accommodation and benefits and just kind of extra miscellaneous stuff that doesn't fit anywhere else. To go along with each of these videos, I have pulled 3 entry-level digger jobs from the British Archaeological Jobs Resource, also known as Badger, which is where most British archaeological jobs are posted. And I am keeping them anonymous because I want to be as objective as possible and not being accused of favoritism or dissing or defaming a company for pointing out something in their job adverts that might be unfavorable. And so with each video that we're doing in this series, I'm then going to take all of the stuff that I talk about in the video and use that to look at these 3 job advertisements and see what I can tell about these companies by using these tools. I haven't worked at any of these companies, so I've pulled these off Badger, and I will also point out before we get right into things that there is a tool on Badger that allows you to compare different companies. So Badger has sent like every company a form to fill out about their company with information that might be interesting for prospective employees, and then they send it back and they get like a little profile set up on the page. Now, this is a great tool to use to kind of compare different companies and also to get a bit more of an idea of a lot of different information about them, and I would highly recommend using it. However, I will point out that not every company fills it out, and even if they do fill it out, not all of them update it regularly, so some of the information might be a bit dated. So always keep that in mind. So like I said, today we're going to be covering just basic background of companies, the people that you are prospectively looking to work for. So I would think that this is common sense, and honestly it's something that you should maybe do for every job you apply for, not just for archaeology. But the first thing you should be asking yourself when you're looking at a company that you potentially want to work for is, who are they? What do they do? You should always, always, always be researching who it is that you want to work for. The most common way that people tend to do this in archaeology is through the grapevine. So you talk to friends or friends of friends who've worked for that company, and you might ask them, are they good to work for? What are the good things about them? What are the bad things about them, etc. I'm aware that many people starting out in archaeology might not have that access to that network yet. So if you are starting completely from scratch, the best thing to do would be to look at a company's website and social media profiles, if they have social media profiles. This will obviously give you a lot more information about the company, especially if they've put effort into curating and making those things up to date. Any website of a company should give you a bit of information of how they got started, how big they are, what kind of services they offer, how many staff they have, etc. Big Archaeological companies in the UK will have websites with a lot of this information. Smaller companies might not. This will probably be because archaeological companies in general don't tend to spend a lot of money on marketing. So if a website looks like it hasn't been updated in a decade or two, or someone doesn't have social media profiles at all, that to me will say that it is a company that is probably a little bit smaller. And for me, as somebody who works in marketing, isn't exactly the greatest impression, especially nowadays when everybody goes to the internet to obtain information. If you are a company that is doing well and, obviously doing a lot of business, a sign of that is having a well curated website and social media profile. The next thing I want to talk about is how big of a company you should be working for. So generally there are big companies like 50 plus people. And then there are medium companies, which are, I would say, anywhere between maybe like 10 to 50 people. And then you have the really small companies that are probably between 1 and 10 people. To simplify everything, I'm going to lump together medium and big companies today, and small companies are going to be by themselves. I have worked for both very big companies and very small companies. Each of them has advantages and disadvantages when you're working with them. I wouldn't necessarily say that any is better than the other. It just kind of depends on what things you're looking for in an employer or what matters to you at the moment, like I said before. With a bigger company, there is the advantage that they tend to bid for bigger projects. So that means that that project will likely go on for a lot longer. They will have more projects going on concurrently. And for you as a potential employee, that means there is a much bigger likelihood that you will be kept on for a longer period of time than at a smaller company. When I say big companies or big projects, I mean these massive infrastructure projects like the A14 or HS2 going on down south in England. They go on for years, not just a couple weeks or a couple months. If you're wanting to make sure that you're employed for a significant period of time on a temporary contract, obviously the bigger companies have more potential for that to be a thing. Additionally, once your project's finish, or maybe you're looking to move up or move into something slightly different at a company, a bigger company will obviously have more room for you to grow. They will have more opportunities, more jobs. However, the disadvantages for working for a bigger company is that because they are so big, it is very easy to kind of get lost in the sea of people. So unless you have a really good line manager, it can be really easy to kind of get lost to the wayside. In that respect, and even if you do have a good line manager, you're always going to be your own best advocate for things, but it just means that you're going to have to be a lot more vocal about the things that you want. Some people are more comfortable with that and some people aren't. Additionally, a bigger company will probably have more than one office. And in the UK, usually that means that they will have multiple offices throughout the entire country, which is good in that if you really want to travel to different projects all over the place, you can probably just go office to office without having to necessarily change who you're working for. But it also might mean that you're having to travel much farther away than you would have expected. If you're hired at a Scotland office, they might expect you to, for certain projects, go down and work in England, which, has its own knock-on effects on how often you get to go back to home and etc. But if alternately maybe you're looking to move to a different part of the country, it'll be a bit more flexible for you to be able to keep your job. So that's kind of medium and bigger companies. And then we have small companies. So like I said, anywhere from 1 to 10 people. One person is obviously a sole trader. You don't usually get them hiring people very often. I would say the average size of a small company is around 5 people. My very first job in archaeology was for a small company with 5-ish people. Advantages to working in that kind of environment are that, you get to know your co-workers really well. There is a lot more variety on the different kinds of projects that you're working on because they're shorter. So you're on different sites of different periods with different things that you're doing. Sometimes you're just doing a watching brief. Sometimes you're doing an evaluation. Sometimes you're doing an excavation. You'll also probably end up getting maybe a lot more hands-on training. That was certainly the case for me. The small company that I worked for, when we were in between jobs and we were in the office, I got to do so much stuff that I never would have had the opportunity to do at a larger company. I was washing and processing artifacts. I was illustrating drawings. I was writing small reports. I was typesetting reports. I was learning stuff about archiving. I did so much stuff that I think the average person working at a bigger company wouldn't do. And that was all really valuable for my training because that helps you get sometimes a bit of a bigger picture of the entire project rather than just one aspect of what's going on. The disadvantages to working for a smaller company is that you generally, in my experience at least, have a lot less job security. Like I said, they tend to have these shorter, more varied projects, but that generally means that there's potential that you'll only get a contract for a couple weeks and they might not have work after that, at which point you will get let go at the end of your contract. So these shorter jobs generally mean they aren't bringing in as much money as the giant infrastructure jobs, so they have less wiggle room in their budget, so they might not be able to keep you on between projects if there's a large gap in between. You'll have a short-term contract for 4 weeks. They don't have anything lined up until the month after that. They can't afford to keep you on for that entire month in between, so you'll get let go at the end of your first contract, and maybe they'll pick you up in a month if they still need you. So if you're looking for more steady work, I wouldn't necessarily always advise to stay at a smaller company because they just have less flexibility with being able to keep you on, especially if they're in a bit of a dry period. So that's kind of the differences between small and big companies. I'm sure there's more, but those were kind of the things that stuck out in my mind the most. Another key thing that you should be looking for in a company that you're working for is if they are a CIFA registered organization. So CIFA is a Chartered Institute for Archaeologists. They have a royal charter. They are a professional body that guides standards within archaeology within the UK. You can be an individual member of CIFA, but they also have a separate program for companies, which is called being a registered organization, or RO. Becoming an RO is something that's open to anyone who is carrying out professional archaeological service in the UK, whether or not you're a sole individual trader or a business, a university, a museum, etc. Being a CIFA RO just basically means that you can demonstrate you do things to a certain quality of work, you uphold certain standards and minimums, you meet quality benchmarks, you subscribe to a certain code of conduct. Is very similar to a lot of chartered organizations. People who are ROs will also be audited every 3 years by CIFA to make sure that they're upholding all the things that they sign on to by being part of a CIFA RO. And so I would say that in general, you should be wanting to work for people who are CIFA registered organizations. Similar to having a website and marketing, smaller companies maybe won't get that certification. I would think that a lot of times this is because it can be quite a costly and lengthy process to apply. You know, it's not just filling in a form, you get visits, etc., and you have to pay a membership every year. Some businesses just might not want to do that. There will also be some businesses that don't think CIFA is worth being in a registered organization, and take from that what you will. But in general, I would recommend working for people that are CIFA registered organizations. Similar but different, you should also be looking to see if you can, because it's not always easy to find out, if the company that you're wanting to work for recognizes a union. Now, unions are a very controversial topic, not only in archaeology, but in the UK. In archaeology, there is a long-running complaint about pay, and people are unhappy, but at the moment, union representation is not high enough to really enact a ton of change. Because in order for a union to do the things a union is supposed to do, they need a majority representation amongst employees. And at the moment, they don't have that. Now, companies can certainly voluntarily recognize a union, which is the case most of the time, but in order to be forced to recognize a union, your company needs to have over 21 staff, and over 10% of that staff need to be part of the union in order for them to actually legally be able to force you to recognize them. 10% is quite small. The most popular unions for archaeologists in the UK are Prospect and Unite. Prospect itself also does have a dedicated archaeological branch. None of the employers that I have worked for in the UK, to my knowledge, recognize a union. And when I went to go look it up online, I couldn't find information for Unite, but for Prospect, there are 6 companies in the UK that are Prospect recognized organizations, but that is out of 62 organizations that have members of Prospect working at them. So 6 versus 62. That's a pretty small portion of the archaeological companies in the UK that recognize unions, especially since this is only Prospect's list, and there are more than 62 archaeological companies in the UK. People and their views on unions are obviously quite mixed. A lot of the people that I have spoken to that are members of a union have only had positive things to say about it. The benefits to being part of a union, outside of the fact that it will give you more leverage when negotiating for salary, which is the thing that most people are concerned about, is that they can also provide you a lot of support when it comes to disputes with your employer. Say if you have to have a disciplinary meeting, or you're having a meeting with your employer where you're not quite comfortable being there by yourself, your union can send a representative to sit with you, even if your company doesn't recognize a union, to my knowledge, just to make sure that you are supported and also know what your rights are. If you have a question about something to do with the way your company is handling something, you can go to your union and ask them, and they will be able to tell you whether or not this is something that is sketchy or it's legit. They can provide you with legal advice if you need it. There's a lot of benefits to having it. Personally, I am a member of Prospect, the union, the archaeological branch. I did not become a member until recently. It's something I put off for a really long time because I was of the viewpoint of like, what are they going to do for me? Nothing. Why would I pay them when I don't need them for anything at the moment? And then as well, when I was working on temporary contracts and like, you don't necessarily know that you're going to have to work next month, paying for something like a union seems like an expense that you could save and make sure that you have food or can afford rent, which is fair enough. I only became a member of Prospect once I had a permanent contract at a company, and the only reason I really signed up is because I was at the CIFA conference and Prospect was there, and they had a special offer that you got the first 6 months free. And then after that, it's less than £10 a month to pay. And now I'm at a place where I can easily pay that without having to worry about it every month. I mean, my gym costs more. Some people will obviously think that it is a mistake for me to admit that I'm part of a union, but it's not something that I necessarily think is worth hiding. You know, I could sue a company for firing me because I'm part of a union. And additionally, in terms of this whole idea of people getting blacklisted because they're part of unions, so people don't want to employ them, that is true to an extent, which is really unfortunate and shouldn't be happening. But additionally, for me personally, if me being part of a union is the deciding factor in a company saying we can't employ this person, I probably don't want to work for that company. Like, because, you know, unions are looking out for the workers. For me, refusing to hire someone solely based on the fact that they are part of a union, to me says that you want carte blanche to treat your workers potentially badly. So to me, that's not necessarily a good thing. So I don't necessarily want to work for that company if that's the case. Now, I'm not trying to pressure people to be part of a union. If you don't want to be part of a union, you know, nobody's saying that you have to. And obviously, when we look at the fact of how many companies recognize a union and how many don't, obviously not recognizing a union is not a sign that a company is a bad employer or someone you don't want to work with. But personally, I would say that recognizing a union is a good thing and shows that employers are, you know, committed to making sure that their employees are happy and have representation in order to be able to approach them about things that they're unhappy with. Okay, so that's kind of the couple things that I would recommend you're always looking at or evaluating when you're looking at a potential company that you want to work for. We're now just going to move on to our little comparison. So like I said, I have 3 job advertisements for the same level job that I've pulled off of Badger. All 3 of the companies in these adverts are CIFA registered organizations, so that's a mark for them in my books. As far as I can tell, none of them recognize unions. That being said, I could only find data for Prospect and not Unite, so I might be wrong. So the company in advertisement number 1 is a big archaeological company. They have offices throughout the UK, so that means that there will potentially be more travel for you, whether or not that's something you are or are not looking to do. There will potentially be opportunities to move between offices depending on where you want to live, and as well the opportunity for longer term contracts on big projects. In addition to just general fieldwork, this company also does community archaeology and consultancy services. So those are 2 extra branches that once you're looking to move on from fieldwork, you could maybe move into. They have a website, they have social media profiles, they're all relatively up to date. However, they haven't filled in their Badger company profile. For me, that's not necessarily something that is in their favor, because if they're a big enough company to have all of this money and time for marketing and social media, you'd think they could put up a company profile, but whatever. The company in the second advertisement is an archaeological department within a big engineering and environmental services firm. So in addition to having the same benefits as the previously listed company in terms of multiple offices and more opportunities for travel, it also means that you could potentially have more opportunities to branch out outside of archaeology if that's what you want to do. They might be a bit more flexible with things like working from home, or have more benefits associated with working for them, better pensions, etc. And they have filled out their company profile on Badger, so that's a mark for them in my book. The company in the third job advertisement is a medium-sized company, I would say. But unlike the other two, they work in a particular geographic area of the United Kingdom. So they will only accept jobs within this area, and so you're not going to have to be traveling hours or plane rides or train rides across the country in the same way if you were working for one of the bigger firms. It's much more likely that you'd be going home at the end of the day rather than staying overnight everywhere. They have like a partner company, so they're not entirely by themselves. So they do have a partner company that maybe you could transfer to if you were looking to leave that particular geographic area. But in general, this is someone that I would recommend if you're trying to stay a bit more at home. And they have filled out their Badger company profile, so another tick for them in my book. So those are those 3 companies and those 3 adverts that we've looked at. And those are the things that I've been able to tell just by using these tools and looking at them on their website. I'm not going to go into a detailed history of them because then they're not anonymous anymore. That's today's video. If you found this video helpful for you today, please give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions related to what I've talked about here, please put them in the comments down below and I will do my best to answer them. If you want to see more from me and keep following this series and see what else I'm going to be talking about, give me a subscribe and help support my channel that way. If you want to follow me on social media, the links are below in the description box, so feel free to give me a follow on there. As per usual, I hope that this video has been helpful for you, and if there's anything here that I missed that you would like covered, please let me know and I'll try to squeeze it in another video. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye!